Greetings and good Wednesday morning, the 29th of March, 2023, still the third decade of the 21st century. It still blows my mind that I say that because it literally blows my mind the sort of things we're dealing with versus where people had expected us to be. If you're new to my channel, whether on YouTube or Rumble, I always open with that just to sort of highlight the fact that it is indeed not just the 21st century, but the third decade, to kind of compare that to where people had predicted us to be and where we actually are. You know, like the sort of things we're still talking about, or the topics that are being reignited, and for what purpose. So this video is one of my atypical, classical read, react, and response videos. Since I have the one and only loyal watcher, specifically commenter, I know some of you still watch, maybe you put it on as background noise and you don't comment as much, that's fine. But Stace, this is for you. So I'm going to read, react, and respond to your comments, whether it's nerdy, socio-political, what have you. I know that the conservative parties are not completely anti-LGBTQIA+. Wow. Is that the actual proper thing with all the letters? And as there wouldn't be log cabin Republicans. However, at the same time, the LCR were left out of the last RNC. Sorry about that. I once owned a house in Columbus, Ohio when I was stationed there, and I still get calls to this day. I haven't owned that house in over a year, but I still get calls. Hey, would you like to sell it? Some of you know exactly what I'm dealing with. All right. The LCR, the log cabin Republicans, were left out of the last Republican National Convention, so that is saying something in my opinion. Yeah, and that just goes back to why I can't be a registered Republican, because at some point in time, the Republican Party decided that they wanted to align themselves with religion. They wanted to align themselves with the church, be it Catholic, Christian, you name it. So if LGBTQIA+ falls outside of any religious scriptural background, then the Republican Party's too afraid to lose its base. When that's the one part I don't get. It's like, you know, like you're like 80% really good on certain things that I can get on board with, and then when it's like talking about your constituents, your people, it's like, oh well, you know, you're a dude who likes duty, you're a chick who likes chicks, or you're a chick who likes both, or you're a dude who likes both, or you're just, your way of life is outside of scripture. I mean, there was a time when religious societies thought that tattoos were bad or piercings were bad. I mean, I think we're making the same point. I understand most of those that attend church or claim themselves to be Christians do not necessarily love thy neighbor, but only love thy neighbor only if they look and think like you. How true is that, right? You know, fun fact, not to go off on a tangent. So the house across the street from me is owned by the Evangelical Church. Since I've lived here, they've got a second pastor and his wife. Now, they've been here for a couple years already. Prior to that was an older gentleman, a Vietnam veteran, and his wife. And I used to love talking to him about topics. And my personal opinion was that I saw conflict in his body language, where as a man of God, he respects and understands that all things are God's creations, whether we like it or not. And that when people, like, say, LGBTQIA+, have, say, conservative values, but their lifestyle conflicts with the church, in my opinion, I saw what I thought was conflict in his body language, where it's like, look, these are good people, you know, and they could still be God-fearing people, just their natural proclivity takes them in this direction. And I don't know, but yeah, it's funny how, and then I talked to the new pastor, I was like, we love them, we accept them as human beings, but we also accept the fact that their way of life is sin, in the fact that as much as we try to live a sin-free life as a human being, none of us are free from sin. So I was kind of I don't want to say I was confused, but I was kind of like, okay, so you're basically accepting the fact that no matter what we do, we're going to sin as human beings. So it's a matter of managing sin. So being part of the LGBTQIA plus means you're openly sinning, but then like there's degree, I don't know. When Arnold was governor, he ran under the Republican ticket. You know, what's so funny is like this weird feud between Arnold and Trump, because I feel like they're the exact same kind of Republican. That, you know, they're more brash, arrogant, you know, running based on popularity versus, you know, policy. I'm not exactly that tuned in, but I want to say at one point in time I heard that Arnold's policies, that he was not a good governor, that his governorship of California was abysmal. I'll be honest, I don't know how much of that is just California in general, that California as a state is so big and filled with so much between agricultural, industrial, military, you know, people on the far left, people on the far right, people in between, that California itself being so big and so vast. I mean, as governor, you have to compete with like the mayor of Oakland, the mayor of Sacramento, the mayor of San Francisco, the mayor of Los Angeles. I mean, you know, there's some pretty major metropolitan areas where the mayor perhaps holds more clout than the governor. But I looked at Arnold kind of like the same way. And I want to say when I was stationed in California, albeit dangerously close to Nevada, Arnold was actually the governor back then. Because I remember that. That was like a huge ticket. Like there was a recall against, I forget the governor's name, but like even Gary Coleman ran and a whole bunch of people. And then last but not least, in any circumstance, there are a ton of possibilities. Jensen has always impressed me, but most of all when I got to see him opening weekend of his brewery, Family Business, because he was working not as an actor but as a businessman. He is a Texan that I'm actually proud of. So if you're kind of new to my channel, not only will I discuss socio-political content, but I also like to nerd out and geek out as well, and Stace is also good for that as well. Yeah, if you're playing catch up, so some crime circus channel hosted by a guy that was all done up in makeup. I don't really know the person, but at first glance, based on the seriousness of the topic, it seemed a little clownish for the topic at hand. Excuse me. But he posted the video and audio footage of the interrogation, whatever you want to say, with Jensen Ackles and the Santa Fe, New Mexico Police Department. And there were a lot of things that Jensen said that really impressed me, specifically how very objective and neutral he was, and how, for all intents and purposes, he may have exonerated Alec Baldwin while at the same time incriminated Alec Baldwin. And you'll just have to forgive me, as somebody who's very, very familiar with guns, not just from the military, but on, you know, now as a veteran civilian, you always check every weapon and treat it as if it were loaded. And Jensen goes on to say that when he receives a weapon from an armorer on set, he dry fires it in the dirt to make sure that it is in fact clear. Dummy rounds, empty, you name it. He does his own verification. In which case, if Alec Baldwin does not do that because, you know, in his opinion, it is his job to have the utmost trust and confidence in the people whose job it is to do that sort of thing, I get it. Unfortunately, and I mean this sincerely, unfortunately, it's things like this, the accidental discharge of a firearm that should have never been loaded in the first place, that may have taught somebody who was otherwise not familiar a valuable lesson. I may not like Alec Baldwin's politics. I will admit, God help me, he is entertaining as all get out. He very rarely gets behind the camera or gets in front of the camera and puts out a bad product. Yeah, he's very polarizing with his political opinions, like Jensen had said. If Mr. Baldwin in all of his years has not been that familiar with firearms, perhaps this unfortunate incident has added a layer of familiarity he was not previously aware of. And I'm not trying to speak vaguely, it's just it's a horrific accident and tragedy, and having listened to Jensen, I do believe in fact it was an accident. Admittedly, I don't know what reasons Alec had for playing with the hammer, unless it was all part of the shot. And Jensen explains that they were trying to get a nice close-up of him doing a slow draw out of the holster. And back then, the weapons were, I believe, double-action revolvers, where you could get the shot off quicker if you could pull the hammer back and lock it in place, making it a much shorter squeeze on the trigger. Why the weapon was pointed at the director, unless the director was trying to get an appropriate camera shot of the barrel, I don't know. But having listened to Jensen, I don't believe it was Mr. Baldwin's intent to shoot anybody, that it was an unfortunate tragedy. Knowing what I know, could it have been prevented? Absolutely. It absolutely could have been prevented, just because of what I know. Unfortunately, if Mr. Baldwin was not as familiar, you know, dare I say he's more familiar now. Based on the way Jensen presented himself, I've always been very impressed with him and Jared, for the most part, if for no reason than, you know, just how they conduct themselves at these conventions they put on. You know, the 15 years on Supernatural, they don't typically offer up much of a political opinion, which I really, really appreciate, because I hate being put in the position where I despise a popular person's political opinions, and it's been very difficult for me. I probably wouldn't be able to stand Pedro Pascal, maybe as a person, at least politically. I despise how he handled the whole Gina Carano incident, but so help me God if I don't love The Mandalorian. And I think part of that is he's covered up during the entire show. So it doesn't necessarily feel like I'm dealing with Pedro Pascal 100%. And it is conflicting, because, yeah, same with Timothy Olmanson. God, I love the stuff he does. I loved him on Psych. God, he was great as Kane on Supernatural. But, yeah, I'm not a fan of his policies. Or his policies. So, I'm also very curious if anybody has seen the interview with Jensen, what you think about the guns in general. And, you know, since we're on the topic, in the last few minutes, I will try to say this. Once again, we have another horrific incident involving a gun, and more importantly, a school. This is the part I don't understand. I don't understand the fascination with schools. And while some people may want to combat the issue, I think deep down what most of these shooters have in common is some sort of mental illness. I don't know the details yet. I would love to hear the details, but I would venture a guess, sorry as I multitask here, I would venture a guess that I wonder if the shooter legally owned the firearms, or if the shooter acquired them in a somewhat illegal manner from a legal owner. Again, it's a god-awful tragedy. As somebody who's lost a child, albeit by illness, losing a child is the loss of a dream. And it's not something I wish upon any parent. Why the fascination with shooting up schools? Why the fascination with shooting in general? I don't know. I'm not going to play the QAnon tinfoil hat theory where the potential indictment of Donald Trump is going south, so the Democratic Party unleashed another sleeper cell to distract the American public. Is there anecdotal, coincidental evidence that could potentially lead itself to that conspiracy theory? Yes. At the end of the day, I can see where people are charged. Because once again, it's another nonsensical act of violence where a gun was used. So it obviously spurs, triggers, and reignites the flames of the anti-gun people. Once again, it fans the flames of the pro-gun, mental health people, where, I think at the end, I don't want to keep saying that phrase over and over. I think what we really need to do a deeper dive into is why, as a society, has this become more prevalent. And I'm not trying to create a conversational piece of nonsense. What I'm trying to say is, we as a society seem to be producing more and more people that appear to be inoculated to violence. We, as Samantha Smith said it on her Instagram page, I think we're up to 89 mass shootings where essentially a crowd of people were engaged by firearms. So it appears as though, I mean, a lot of things are true. First and foremost, the speed, the frequency, and the ability to get information out there has exceeded what it once was. Where I think if you dive back into the archives, this has happened before, but it stayed local. It may have made a blurb on the nightly news, but normally your news, focused on locality. Where now we seem to be a more national and global news-oriented society. And then my other question is, which I don't know the answer to, is why do we seem to have a society of people who are more open and prone to committing violence? Where, you know, when I was younger, to include my teens and my early 20s, it was not the thing you thought of. It was not in you know, like, oh man, I've been so wronged, I've been so angered. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go shoot up as many people as possible. That had absolutely nothing to do with my source of anger. I mean, it's one thing, I'm not saying I agree, but I can at least try to wrap my head around, as a functioning, rational person, if you reach the point where death and violence is the only recourse and you go at the people that are directly responsible for it. I'm not saying it's right, but I can at least understand. This person or these persons agree, you know, have aggrieved you, have angered you, have spurned you, whatever the case may be. And they are the direct focus of your ire. What I don't understand is the somewhat indiscriminate, you know, like, what did the 3 children do to the shooter? All right, what did the staff members do anything? Were the staff members the target and the children were? I don't get it. I don't understand this propensity for violence. And the only thing, as a pro-gun person, the only ground I will concede in any way, shape, or form is, why guns? Because so many pieces have to have to go together to create this picture in the puzzle, right? So the puzzle's fractured. Now you got to put the pieces together to get the picture, right? So you need a tool. That's the gun. So why that choice of a tool? If the tool was absent, would the person still have committed the act? The person reached the point where they were willing to commit to the act, all right? And they had made peace with it and they were ready to do it. So is it the tool that pushed them over the edge? Did something else push them over the edge? And then if you can remove the tool, like the anti-gun people want to remove the tool, where other people are going to say, like, well, if you remove the tool, they'll just find something else. Will they, though? Will they? I mean, I don't want to lose my Second Amendment rights. All right? I want to maintain my Second Amendment rights. But I don't, what I don't know, and the answer I don't have is, like chicken and the egg, right? Which one came first? These people are already reached the point where they're willing and ready to commit violence. And they've made the decision they're going to commit violence, to include taking another human's life or multiple people's life. So is it the removal of the tool that will change their mind, or will they ultimately find another tool? I don't know. Because if they do, are we hearing about it as much? Is it publicized as much? Are we informed as much? Or is it part of a narrative that doesn't suit the modern desires of news agencies, that they won't report it? So if that same person decided to use a vehicle, would it become that 30-second blurb? And in Nashville, a driver ran into a school, killing. But it's a vehicle. It's not the gun. The vehicle's not the source of attention. It's not the source of political turmoil. So we don't focus on it as much. I don't know. But I'm curious to hear what anybody has to say. You know, do you believe the tool is the source of the motivation? That do you believe that the media is promoting the tool, which is promoting the motivation. You know, do you think that we would hear about it as much if the tool wasn't used? And then, of course, anything else I talked about, be it Jensen Ackles or Republican Party, whatever, please feel free to comment. All right? Whether you've used this as background noise, I thank you for watching. But more importantly, I'm more interested in your comments and having these conversations, because I think that's the way forward. We need to converse with one another. We need to have these conversations, even if we disagree. We need to recognize each other as people. We need to recognize each other as American citizens or global citizens. We need to reach out to one another and share our differences and recognize each other as human beings who share this planet, who share this world, who share this country, this state even, and find ways to and work together. So if you leave a comment, I promise I will read, react, and respond to it. And if you do, I appreciate it. You're awesome. Till next time, stay safe out there.